Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thank you once again for joining me on the podcast for another week. This week, I'm going to go through why the time that you are trying to fit your training, your exercise, your physical activity into might be the wrong time for you, and why for a lot of people that I coach, mornings turn out to be the best time for them to train. Before I get into today's topic, I'd love for you to do me a few favors. Number one, please make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. You can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, all the major podcast platforms. Jump on there, give us a subscribe, give us a like, and share it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of what it is that I am doing here. The other thing is, please make sure you are following along on the social media. So at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook, at The Unstoppable Dad on TikTok as well. And you can also find video versions of this podcast on the Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and also on the free Facebook group where I have uploaded quite a few free resources to help dads on their health, fitness, wellness, mental health journeys. So that's it. That's the housekeeping. Let's get into today's topic. So, conversation that I've had countless amounts of times over the last 15 years is, what time is the best time for me to do my training? Now, this conversation and this episode is really targeted at those people who are really struggling to get consistent with their training or adding in some form of exercise regime. They kind of get started and then life gets in the road and then they come back to it, or they might get a good run for a month or two and then they kind of fall off the wagon because other things get in the road, other priorities get set forward, but they never really get a good level of consistency all the way through for an extended period of time with their training. And it isn't this podcast and this episode and this conversation isn't ever one I have with someone who has a good training regime, has a good training program, and is able to be super consistent. Now, when I talk about consistency first, let's set the groundwork and set the scene for what I mean by consistency. Consistency doesn't mean that you're perfect every single week. If your goal is to train 3 sessions a week, there is going to be weeks where you don't hit that. There may be weeks where you don't hit any, because at the end of the day, when you are a busy professional parent, father, husband, and you've got a lot of other priorities, which at different times in your life are going to take priority over your own over doing exercise, you're not going to be perfect every single week. What consistency means is over the course of an extended period, and when I say an extended period, I'm talking 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, not just like a 6 to 12 week period, but over that time, you're able to hit that goal, that consistency goal, maybe that 3 times a week, 4 times a week, or whatever it is, more often than you're not. Where this is designed to, and where this conversation generally happens with a lot of people, is when they really know that they want to implement some form of training program, some form of training regime. And what they do is they're able to find consistency in spits and spurts, right? So they understand that it needs to be a priority in their life. But normally what they'll do is they'll be consistent for 3 to 4 weeks, and then they won't be for 2 to 3 weeks. And then they might be able to get another week or two. And then it's this ebb and flow between consistency and then not being able to get anything done, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And where I find there's some people that struggle with this is, I've done a few episodes on this in the past, but it comes down to a lot of people try to implement old habits that they had that was successful for them at a different time of their life. I.e., they used to go to the gym before they had kids, before they had this particular busy role that they do, and now they used to do that in the afternoon, and it worked for them then. They got great results. They were able to maintain consistency for an extended period of time, so they're just going to go back to doing that. And then what happens is they're determined to do it, so they're able to stick to it for a short period of time. But then over time, they're not able to build that long-term consistency just because circumstances are different. And a very common theme that I talk to a lot of people about, and that I've covered off on the podcast a lot, is that you need to accept that you are in a different set of circumstances to what you were in the past. So some of the things that you used to do that worked really well for you in the past, in a previous life or in a previous iteration of yourself, in a previous season, whatever label you would want to put on it, are not necessarily going to work for you now. And you need to be able to understand that, take the ego out of it, because I think for a lot of people, when they want to change a habit or routine from something that they used to do, one of the biggest things that stops them from doing it is their ego. And they almost feel like they've failed because they're not able to go back to what they used to do. And it's not a failure at all. It's a pivot and an understanding that you have to change and adapt to the current set of circumstances that you're in. And once we get past the fact that they need to put the past in the past and let the past be the past and draw a line in the sand and move forward, then we can start to have a conversation about, all right, let's have a look at where things are going to fit in for you right now, or where things are best going to fit in for you right now. And one thing I've seen time and time again, and this isn't a blanket statement for everybody. If you've listened to the podcast for long enough, you know that everything and every bit of advice or every story that I tell is always going to be context dependent. But the more conversations I have with busy parents, just people with busy lives, busy jobs, maybe they're a director at a company or they have a high-level job, and they're trying to add in some form of wellness regime that includes training, most people that are in those circumstances end up training in the morning because it's where they can actually build the most consistency from. And the reason that I believe, and this includes myself too, because over the years, I've been a person that has trained generally after lunch. Now, I'm going to go into some of the benefits of training in the afternoon as well too, because there's pros and cons to doing each. But I've been a person in the past who's trained in the afternoon, trained after lunch, even at nighttime. And when I had kids, when I had a business over the years, I've actually shifted to the vast majority of my training now is done in the morning. Now, I am in a very privileged position where I have a lot of access and a lot of flexibility with the way I've set my life up, but I've done that by design, and I have a lot of access to be able to train at different times when I want. But the number one thing that, and I'm digressing a little bit from the topic of the subject, but the biggest thing that needs to be done when you are trying to become consistent with your training is you do need to plan it in. You need to understand, even if it's just on a micro level, so a weekly basis, when you're going to be doing that. Just trying to do it when you're able to, without actually sitting down at the start of the week and going, right, I'm going to train on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever that looks for you. It's not going to work long term. It's just simply not. I haven't met somebody who doesn't already have a very strong existing plan in place who is able to do that. Somebody who's trying to implement a new plan, if they don't go through the prior planning procedure, bit of alliteration there, they're setting themselves up for failure if they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and just trying to fit it in when they do. Because what happens is they cram it into the back of the week because everything else gets prioritized over the top of it because they haven't blocked out that time for themselves. However, the more I go into this and the longer I've done this and the more busy parents, busy professionals that I deal with, the more I realize that a lot of people will find success by shifting their training time to the morning because they're able to do it first up before anything else will ever get in the road. And it's sometimes a very hard bridge for people to cross. Firstly, from the point of view of what I've just spoken about, where it's like there's this ego attached to training at a particular time because it worked for me before I had kids in a previous life. whatever the reason may be, and they kind of feel like they've failed a little bit in order to having to change that. And it's not a failure at all. It's just that this acceptance that we've moved into a different phase in our life, therefore a different approach is needed. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is people are like, I don't get up early. I'm not a morning person. Well, that's a set of circumstances that you're telling yourself. And I can tell you right now, most people who commit to doing it actually find it better for the sole reason that they can get up, they can get their training done, and nothing else can get in their way. Because a lot of the reasons why the afternoon falls down for a lot of people, there's looking after the kids, there's being there for your wife, you may get held up at work. So if you've got other things, you get held up at work for a couple of extra hours, that eats into your training time. Like, there are variables that are sometimes outside of our control, or that we choose to prioritize over, that happen in the afternoon, that generally for most people aren't going to happen in the mornings. Now, that's why I feel that a lot of people find success in building consistency with their training in the morning. And yes, there can be advantages to training in the afternoon. One of the biggest ones is just being appropriately fueled, right? So making sure that we've actually had something to eat. A lot of people, if they're training in the morning, myself included, I generally, if I'm going to train early, so for me, if I'm doing a gym workout here at home, I generally won't have anything to eat. It will be the same if I'm going to jiu-jitsu, not because I believe in some far out there fasted cardio is the answer. It's not that at all. I just don't. I actually feel if I have something to eat very early in the morning, as soon as I wake up, I actually sometimes feel a little bit sick. I probably should look into why, but I just don't tend to eat in the morning. And my body has adapted to be able to let me train. Now, there is some things from the point of view of if I'm doing a strength workout, or if I'm doing, say, for example, jiu-jitsu, sometimes I will find that I lack energy if I'm doing some rounds of sparring later on, because the fueling's not quite there. So the advantage of training in the afternoon is I can be appropriately fueled. But this can also be negated a little bit with the stress that happens to us throughout the day, because that can negatively affect our energy levels. So stress from work, stress from family, self-imposed stress, whatever form of stress happens to you throughout the day, that can negatively affect your energy levels and the output that you can put into a workout in the afternoon. So as you can see, even with those two examples, there are a few pros and cons to training in that afternoon time slot. But then the con for a lot of people is they've just got a lot of stuff that continually seems to get in the road, whether it be the fact that they're not great at planning and they're not great at prioritizing in the afternoon after they get to work for that kind of time slot in the current state of being that they're in, or that it needs to take priority at that time. Whereas in the morning, while the fueling thing is not quite where it needs to be, and for some people it can be, some people may wake up a half an hour earlier than the session that they want to and actually have something to eat before they go and do it. And if that's you, great. I'm not here to tell you that fasted cardio or doing it that way needs to be done. I'm just saying for me and for a lot of people, they just kind of get up and get going, get to their training session and get it done and have something to eat afterwards. So that's one byproduct of training in the morning, and compared to the afternoon, that's one kind of pro if you do it in the afternoon compared to the morning. Now, the other reason that a lot of people won't train in the morning is because they say they're not a morning person. Well, there's a few things that we need to look at, and we need to kind of questions you need to ask yourself here. Why are you not a morning person? Is it that you have a job that requires you work shift work, right? And then maybe you don't finish till midnight, so you're not getting to bed till like 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, that's probably a good reason not to be a morning person. So if you're one of those people, you may need to look at an alternative plan. If you're the type of person that works a pretty standard, 9 to 5 job, and you don't have any commitments where you're not able to go to bed at a reasonable hour, like 9, 10 o'clock, that would stop you from getting that 6 to 7 to 8 hours of sleep and still be up at 4, 5 o'clock in order to get an early session in before everyone gets up, then you may find that you're just not a morning person because you haven't given it a good go, or that you're actually prioritizing other things at nighttime, staying up a little bit too late, therefore you're not able to get the adequate amount of sleep. So if that's the case, then maybe we need to look at what the priorities are. Maybe it is, and I touched on this in an episode a few weeks ago, maybe it is dropping the extra Netflix episode and going to bed an hour earlier. Maybe it's, if you play video games, it's getting off the video game console at nighttime and getting to bed at a reasonable hour, getting to bed a little bit earlier, putting the phone down, getting off screens, creating some good sleep habits for yourself so that you can go to sleep earlier, so that you can wake up earlier. So maybe that's another thing that needs to be looked at as well too, in order to rejig that the preconceived idea that you need to be training in the afternoon. And if you do that, and if you make the commitment that you're going to try and train in the morning, there are a few tips that I would give you in order to make sure that it becomes easier for you to stay consistent. The very first thing is have everything ready to go the night before. Seems like a very oversimplistic thing to say, but I mean, have your shoes out, have your training gear there, have it set out the night before so that when you wake up, and you can even go as far as having it sit next to your bed if you need to push yourself to that level because maybe you don't have the discipline to walk out and get the clothes from wherever you need to, but have them set out, have them ready to go. So all you need to do is get up and you need to get into your clothes as soon as possible. The other thing with that, with getting up first thing, is get up to the first alarm. Throw yourself out of bed when the alarm goes off the first time. Now, there's going to be mornings where that is going to be very, very hard. But as an adult, if this is important to you, you need to throw the covers off yourself. When the alarm goes off the first time, just get out of bed. That needs to be something that has to happen. Otherwise, if the longer you stay in there for, the more times you hit snooze, the less chance in the early stages of this habit change there is of you actually getting up and you going and fulfilling the promise that you're making to yourself. So that's the thing. Get up, first alarm, if you have to set an alarm. And if you're doing this for the first time, you probably will have to set an alarm. And then have the gear out the night before so you can just get changed straight into it. And then from there, prep what you need for after the session as well. So if you need, so let's look at food, for example. If you feel like you need to have something to eat beforehand, think about what that's going to be. That might be a banana, it might be a piece of fruit. I've told quite a lot of people, like, just having a banana before you go to train in the morning seems to work for a lot of people because it's not heavy. There's a good amount of potassium in there as well too, which may help with kind of cramping, but having, a good glass of water and having a banana in the morning generally will help if you have that before training, if you're the type of person that needs to eat before training. But then also too, and this is where some people get unstuck, because if you're working a simple, I shouldn't say simple, if you're working a 9-to-5 job, you may find that by training, say, at 5:30, you're then finishing at 6:30, takes you 15 minutes to get home. You've got a smaller window to get ready for work. So you probably want to have some breakfast prepped already for yourself to eat. If it's not prepped, you need to know exactly what you're having and have like your work clothes set out, have everything ready to go to make that process of getting ready for work or getting ready for what you need to do after the training session easier. So by doing those planning things for both before the session and after the session, when you first wake up and then when you first get home, it can make the whole process easier for you to implement, because it's taking a lot of the thinking and it's also taking that reason of I'm going to be late for work out of it. It's going to take that reason of I'm not a morning person. Yes, there is going to require some level of self-discipline in order to follow through on those things, but you need to commit to doing that. Like if you're serious about actually implementing a strength regime and doing some form of structured training, and the morning needs to be the time where you can do it because it doesn't interfere with family time in the afternoon or anything else, then by taking these steps, you're setting yourself up for success, and then it's just on you to follow through on that plan. Some things that are going to come up when you first start training in the morning that I've seen come up when I first made the switch, and I've seen come up in a lot of people's lives. First thing, if you're switching to that time because you're trying to build consistency, you need to stick to it for at least 4 to 6 weeks, because it is going to take that amount of time for you to just even start to adapt to, or your body to start to adapt to you doing the movement in the morning. Okay, and what I mean by that is when you first start doing it, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel lethargic, you're going to feel like you lack strength and energy when you do it, but you go into it, do it with that expectation, and you go into it when you do the session, having the understanding that this is potentially how I'm going to feel, okay, but what I am doing, my initial goal for that first 4 to 6 weeks is just to create the habit. And once I've kind of got through that initial stage, you will start to feel your energy come back. You'll start to feel your strength come back. You will start to feel like you can push yourself from the baseline that you've created over that first 4 to 6 weeks. But if you go into training in the morning when you've, say, been an afternoon trainer, and you start to compare yourself, if you're doing, say, strength work, if you're doing, you're doing some HIIT work or whatever the case might be, and you're trying to compare workout numbers to previous times in your life, that can start to be a bit of a mental beatdown where you're going to start to feel a bit defeated, because it's like, oh, this isn't working. This isn't I'm just not doing what I used to do. It's a whole other bag of things we can open up within that particular context. But just remember, if you stick to it for the first 4 to 6 weeks, all you're trying to do is build the consistency in that time slot for that time. The other things will come in line once you have built the consistency. The numbers will come, the progression will come. But right now, if you're in the stage where you're looking at moving the time slot that you train, there's a reason for that. It's probably because you're not able to build the consistency you want in the time slot that you're trying to fit it into now. So you're making that shift in your life to try and move it to a more advantageous time slot for building that consistency. Okay, so commit to it and have the focus and have the goal in the early stages that all I'm trying to do is just show up and do these sessions to the best of my ability right now. And look, over time, it's not going to be easy sailing. You're going to have to, there's going to be weeks where you're not going to feel like going. There's going to be weeks where you're going to feel like hitting that snooze button a few more times. There may even be weeks where you've decided, hey, look, I'm just going to only go twice this week because I've got this on and this on and this on, and you're prioritizing other things, and that's okay. But the biggest thing is, as I said at the start of the episode, when it comes to your training, you want to make sure that you're consistent, and not just consistent for a 6 to 12 week block, but consistent over the long period of time. And for me, consistency means that you're doing the thing that you have set out to do for an extended period of time, and you're able to do it more often than you're not. That is how you, and then that's how you build consistency, and that's how you get the results. So let me know if you're a morning trainer. Let me know if you're an afternoon trainer. And more importantly, if you are planning on trying out some of the things that I've said because you're not able to build that consistency, let me know how you go with it. If you need help with that and building out a specific plan for you and your set of circumstances, as always, this advice is always context specific. I always recommend that you reach out and talk to somebody. If it's about training, if it's about implementing a plan that's right for you, you can reach out to myself. If you're struggling with mental health or you're struggling to, you're just struggling to get past the time in your life, go and seek professional help, because that's always going to be the best course of action and the most direct thing that is hopefully going to get you to a better place in your life. So thanks again for listening. I appreciate it. I've gone a little bit over on this, but this is something that I've had a lot of conversations about, so there's a lot to unpack. So hope you got some value out of it. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.